And okay, then I need to go to my YouTube page. And I'm not going to keep you here. For those of you that are here, can you hear me, sister? Doc, can you hear me?
Yes, ma.
Yes, yes.
I can.
Yes, Onya, can you hear me? For those of you that are here, I'm not going to waste your time. Once I go
Yes, I can.
Yes, once I go on, I'll start because it's going to be recorded in the cloud and people can watch it later. I know how busy everybody is, you know, so that you are here, it's already this thing on its own. So I don't want to take your time. So let me just let it go up on my, I need this band for it to go on up here. Okay, admit, continue. Okay. We're going to go live there now. Just a second, let me make it go live on. Welcome, Messi Benefactor. Yes, I see you. Welcome. As you come in, please, I just urge you, kindly mute your devices, please. Because we'll be going live now. And as we go live, I'm going to start with a video. Thank you for those of you that came in early. I can always, okay, good. So I'm going live now. So we're live up and about, we are live. Okay, good evening. You're welcome to this special workshop, Parents Awareness Workshop, to mark the International Day Against Drug Addiction and Trafficking. So this is a session I hope will start everyone, that's if you've not started already, on a journey of understanding what it entails. So Mercy, please, you need to mute on your end, or let me just mute her. Good evening. Yes, I'm muting. Good evening. Please, if you're watching, excuse me, if you're watching on Facebook or something on your end, please, can you just mute? Mute. I don't know what's going on. Let me just quickly. Okay, so I need to go off on this thing too. So quick one. I'll quickly put up a video I would like each and every one of us to just briefly watch before we continue. So let me just share my screen. Okay. Thank you very, 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 very much. I'm sure you just had a glimpse of something, that very, very short documentary. Basically, that's what this day is all about, you know, bringing to the forefront the malady that is drug addiction. Yes, we know we have adult addiction, but it's getting worse with each passing day with children. Even children who you think are the most unlikely to be caught up in addiction are, you know, getting addicted with each passing day. And it's, you know, it's such a worry, and we begin to wonder what exactly can be done about this. So it's with that in mind that I, you know, decided to do this today. Like, for most of you already know, I mean, have a backstory of, I mean, who I am. You know that I was once on this journey, and by the grace of God, come July 12th, as a matter of fact, I'll be 15 years sober, 15 years of sobriety. It becomes important for us to share this message, and as much as possible, you know, get as many people as we can get, you know, invested in ensuring that the future of our children are secure. And this dastardly malady of drug addiction will be dealt with once and for all. And it starts with just that one person saying, I would ensure as best as I can to make sure my home, my children, and everyone around me is, you know, successfully drug proofed, as they usually would describe it. So today I want to quickly put on the screen what the highlights of this discussion will be, because I'm going to stick to script, because you can't pigeonhole the discussion on drug addiction. Like today's, let me share the screen so you just see it. I don't want to, so you have an idea of what we'll be discussing today. So today we'll simply be discussing the following, and I hope you can see it. Number one, why do teens use drugs? Number two, the telltale signs of teens, sorry about that typo, the telltale signs of teens who are using drugs, the current drug trends that teens are at risk of, how your parenting style, you know, can predispose your child to addiction. Yes, how your parenting style can predispose your child to addiction. And finally, how to drug-proof your home, both physically, and how to drug-proof your child. And at the end of it, we'll be having question and answers, and I hope there'll be questions. So let's just hold tight. And please, I beg you, I hope you're holding your arrows, because this is like you know, academic discussion, I dare say. So let me quickly just stop this and let's just go to the business at hand. Number one, like the first thing I asked or said I was going to discuss is, why do people use drugs? You know, one of the reasons why, I'm sure I'm not the only one doing this, all over the world people are doing this today, is because there's this very, very strong belief that parental monitoring and supervision is critical for drug abuse prevention, you know, and one of the ways we can enhance the skills are by what we're doing today, you know, informing training, so you can set rules. They call them rule setting techniques for monitoring activities concerning your children in the home. Just in case you're not clear on anything, just make a mental note or a physical note, and I'll be glad to explain as we go. So the first thing we need parents to understand when we're talking about drug education is that there's no need to approach it with fear. You know, no need to approach it with fear. Yes, like I always say, it's good enough when you say, oh, God forbid. But you know, God forbid becomes very strong when you know you have the information, you have the prerequisite information, you know what to look out for, you know what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior. And then when you do that, you know, you begin to parent in such a way, because whether we like it or not, most of the teens now, our children, most of them are Gen Z. they're Gen Z. Yes, we as parents, we've gone through the throes of being teenagers, young adults and all that, but whether we like it or not, we're not just in the digital age anymore, we're now in the meta age. So there's so many things that are happening around us that we need to be equipped. We need to be equipped. And if we're not equipped, at the end of the day, God forbid that we have regrets and all that. So, when you understand these things in moderation, you're able to direct your focus on how best to ensure your child is not caught in the throes of addiction. You hear things of, no, now, he wasn't brought up like that. She wasn't brought up like that. But we forget that our children do not exist in a cocoon anymore. They do not exist in the cocoon anymore. There's so much that is thrown at them daily. It's not like our time when I don't know how many of you are in that generation where you had to wait till 4 p.m. to watch telly. You had to wait till a particular time. Now they are constantly bombarded by all kinds of things, all forms of information. So one of the reasons why we do this today is not to make parents begin to, become paranoid. No, far from it. But for you to understand the nitty-gritty of what this is all about. Because remember, they say the world is ruled by the God of, when you say this, when they say God, small g, of course, OD, there's sex, drugs, money, and in fact, so many things. Call it the God of hedonism, but drugs plays a pivotal role in this. And that is where we need to do this to understand how to help our children, better meander life as we know it today. So we wonder, first of all, most people say drug abuse, drug addiction. Before we go on, let me just quickly distinguish between the two because they're not the same. When you talk about drug abuse, it's totally different from drug addiction. I'm sure some of you know that already, so I'll just briefly refresh. When we talk about drug abuse, we say when you use drugs unnecessarily. Like for instance, I'm sure we have a medical person here, Dr. Gochi is here with us. When they tell you to take 2 Panadol 3 times a day, and you take 3 Panadol 4 times a day, or you take 4 Panadol 4 times a day because you're feeling pain, that's how the thing is doing you and all of that. That's inappropriate use of the drug. And that in itself is drug abuse. When they call it being coercive with the use of drugs. You just use it any which way you like. After all, I'm having a headache. I must take 3 Panadol. In other words, the doctors didn't know what they were saying when they prescribed 2 Panadol tablets instead of 3. So that's drug abuse. Then when we talk about drug addiction, we're talking about the continued use of that product. Like for instance, you're supposed to take this very drug that people abuse now, tramadol. It will surprise you that tramadol is actually a pain med. So you start taking it, you start abusing it. Like I said, you're taking more than the recommended dosage and all of that. Then before you know it, you continue using it, and maybe you don't feel pain anymore, but you continue taking it probably because it made you feel good. So when you begin to use a drug for any other thing more than its recommended use, addiction, the journey of addiction starts. And when you start getting addicted, before you know it, you can't function if you don't take tramadol. No, you're not in pain, but you must take tramadol to feel good, to make you function. It now becomes drug dependency. And that is when you reach the higher echelon of addiction where you lose total control. So you see, it's a journey. And you'll see that 3 children can start that journey. One will abuse and perhaps stop. Another would abuse and it will move to addiction, and before you know it, dependence. Another person will take it once and not do it anymore. So you see, where people will always say, oh, when you take a drug, you get addicted. There are so many factors So many factors that affect whether or not somebody is going to go through that journey and eventually become an addict and, God forbid, become somebody who is totally dependent on the drug of abuse and now becomes that person that will be tagged a drug addict who, to get a new lease on life, would have to seek treatment. So it's like I said the whole spectrum of the talk of addiction, abuse, dependency is large. But today, we're going to stick to just educating you parents, not just parents, educators, anyone who has anything to do with a child or a teen for that matter, or even a young adult, to understand what this is all about. So like I said, the study that we're here on. So why do you think people take drugs? In studies, they've given people, especially, you don't get the reasons for why drugs are taken by people who have not abused drugs or have not been addicted. No, that's one thing about the study of addiction is based, on statistics, on reports, on feedbacks of people who are either currently in treatment or people who have been addict once and probably right now are being, mentored or being sponsored, or people who have thankfully been sober for as long as, they've escaped the claws and clutches of the drug of abuse. So people give many reasons why they use drugs. So I'll just list them out. I said I want to stick the script, so I wouldn't keep you for too long. So many reasons people say they use drugs. They'll tell you they use it because they want to change something about their lives. Actually, young children, they take drugs because they want to fit in. You'll see even at young adults, they're stressed. Right now, they say adulting is a scam and all that. And so because they're tired of the stress, they can't, handle whatever it is thrown at them. They'll tell you, we take drugs to escape or relax. We take drugs to relieve boredom. When I get to the section on current trends of drugs that these young ones are into, you'll understand what I mean by taking drugs to just kill boredom. Some young teens, they take drugs because they want to seem grown up. I remember back in the day when we were little children, there's how we used to associate cigarettes. Remember all those Marlboro adverts of that time? You just see a cowboy prancing on his horse and things like that. They used to make it look glamorous. So most children, they will tell you they started this journey because they wanted to seem all grown up. And some people go into drugs because it's a sign of rebellion for them. They need to rebel. They need to rebel against society. They need to rebel against parental authority. They need to rebel against educational authority, societal authority. People choose to do drugs because of that. Then the one that is quite common amongst young children, amongst teens, is experimentation. And that's the dangerous one. Remember, I talked about the spectrum of drug abuse to drug addiction and then drug dependence. Because like in the case of marijuana, you can see one child will take marijuana and, well, nothing. The second child will take marijuana. I'm sure some of you have seen most of this. They're not skits. They're actually video clips of things that really happen with all the kind of street drugs we have now. They even use them for songs. They glamorize drugs, loud, Californian loud, all kinds of things, Canadian loud, and the rest of it. Some children take it for the first time and they start barking like dogs. That's what experimentation does. So quickly, I've just taken you through a rundown of why people take drugs. Remember, when I'm talking about people, I'm talking about the demographics that we're talking about today. And that's children, that's teens, preteens, and of course, young adults. Because if we have to list out why people take drugs and we involve adults, there are a lot more reasons why people take drugs. So I've just tried as much as possible to streamline this to why the young person will take drugs. And there are different ways of administration of these drugs. And that's one of the things parents watching this, children educators watching this should know. And there are 5 major ways drugs are taken. Number one is inhaling, through inhalation. Number two is injection. Number three, they call it mucous membrane absorption. Number four, oral ingestion. And number five, contact absorption. Don't worry, I don't want to get ahead of myself. When I'm talking about and discussing the current trends of drugs that children are most likely to experiment, or even already experimenting, or God forbid, already abusing and maybe addicted to, I would explain the 5 routes of administration. That is the inhaling, injecting, mucous membrane absorption, the oral ingestion, and contact absorption. So if you have any questions on this thing, please signify. I'll come to you because, like I said, we're in class. So I don't want anyone to feel left out or anyone to kind of be confused and leave this session still confused. You understand? But like I said, when I started, it's a journey of, first of all, taking the drug, abusing it, becoming addicted to it, becoming totally dependent on the drug, that your life loses control. That's why you see somebody doing anything for a fix. So these levels of use I talked about, because for laymen, everybody just sees somebody that says, oh, she's a drug addict. Oh, he's a drug addict. I'm not going to go into much of that here, but just in case, we do it actually when we're talking about intervention for people whose kids are already using. You must understand the level at which your child, your brother, your sister is using, because that way you can intervene. And I'll just quickly list it here because for informative purposes. So like I said earlier, I said there's a drug use, there's drug abuse, there is drug addiction, there is drug dependence when the person is, I mean, for me personally, you know, I actually went through the whole route. So I was classically dependent on the drug pentazocine and was so for like 7 years, total loss of control. Everything just crumbled. So at that point, like I said earlier, you would need massive intervention for that person to come out of it. So the information we're giving today is so you'll be able to nip it in the bud, so to speak. You would not have to wait till it's late. And that is why when we talk about drug prevention awareness, we say prevention is better than cure. So the levels of use, I will just list them. Number one, there's somebody who is abstinent. Please, can you just mute if you're just coming in? Thank you. There's abstinence. Then from abstinence, there's what they call experimentation. And this happens in children. You see a child who is clean, who has never done drugs before and everything. And God forbid, one day you hear this child is on drugs. The child just didn't start taking drugs. The child went through these levels. There's first abstinence when the child was not doing it at all. There's experimentation. And that is why we want to do this today. And we're doing this already. So you can even identify if your child is experimenting. Because before your child becomes an addict, before your child becomes an abuser, before your child does what they call habituation, there is experimentation. And it doesn't matter whether your child is out of home or whatever, at least there's a point at which you have contact with that child. So you can truly understand and know the point at which your child is tipping the scales. But you see, most parents, like there's a point when I said, I'm going to talk about, does your parenting style affect your child? There are some parents who are helicopter parents. They do helicopter parenting. They hover over their children. So they're quick to spot. They're quick to spot. But you know, there are some parents, they just flutter. And that's why you see, God forbid, especially in children who eventually are caught out in addiction, such parents would always blame it on other people. It's his friend, it's her friend, it's this, because most times they didn't identify when that child was in the experimental stage. So like I said, the levels are, number one, abstinence, the child is good. wasn't doing anything. Number two, experimentation. And we hope from today we'll be able to catch it when there's experimentation. Number three, social and recreational. The child now sees the need to, once in a while, be taking the marijuana. It's not doing anything to him, it just makes him feel good. Before he was experimenting with friends, now this child is able to be doing it on his own. Then God forbid, it now tips to what they call the habituation, where the child is now becoming a habit. Oh, taking that one wrap, two wraps, it's a habit. It's not doing anything to him. Then before you know it, it hits abuse. Before you know it, it hits addiction. So good, we're done with our part one, which is why people use, and in essence today, we're talking about why a young child or a young person will use, because we're talking about the youth. So I guess we're going to the interesting part now, part two. Remember, I talked about experimentation and how the kind of parenting style you operate will make you identify the point at which, God forbid, the child is already using. So signs that point to the fact that a child is using. And I want to make this clear to us. See, the fact that the symptoms might be there, it doesn't necessarily mean the child is abusing drugs. Or usually they call them indicators. They refer to them as indicators, because when something starts happening, there's this saying, they say, is it frog does not run or toad does not run around during the day, except something is pursuing it or something like that. Yes. So nobody just sits down and automatically. Yes, we know when a child is in the teen years, in the preteen years, there's the issue of adolescent hormones, hormonal imbalance and all that, teenage angst. But like I said, if you are quick and you are that parent who is always helicoptering around their kids, hovering, you would, at least there'll be a kind of flashpoint, and you know that, nah, this doesn't look good. So whilst they are signs, whilst they are indicators, they don't necessarily mean the child is using, but you must look out for them. And one thing about the parenting style, if you're a parent who understands your teenager's passions, like I have a child who's going to be 14, my last. And I just bless God that with this child, I call him, maybe because I call him my bonus and it's my old age child. I put it that way. Yes. I had him when I was almost 40. So I kind of have a keen interest. When there's a mood switch or there's a mood change, you must, if as a parent, you understand your teen's passions, their interests, their habits, when things kind of shift, consider it a warning sign. I'm not saying you should be paranoid, but you must, with the information you get today, begin to wonder and say, no, something must be amiss. And if you have reason, after I list out these things to you, that you suspect that maybe the child is using or not, one thing I always like to encourage parents is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to err on the side of caution. It's better you are able to alienate every possibility that your child is using than for you to be an ostrich, because that's what most parents are. For most children, like I said, when I was in rehab for like 8 months, I mean, I was an adult abuser, For in the posts, the captions I used when I was advertising this program, I said it was so heartbreaking to see 18-year-olds, 17-year-olds, promising guys from some of the best universities in Nigeria. And during group, most of the underlying issues the children had was my parents did not pay attention to me. And this is not trying to put it at the doorstep of the parents, because one thing, even if your child is eventually using, don't blame yourself. You will see that as we go. Don't blame yourself. Yeah, you can take the blame if deep down you know that you're an ostrich parent, because ostrich parenting most times is one of the key reasons why a young child would use. Why a young child will use. And like I said, we're not talking about adults abuse today, because there are, like when I talk about having been an addict, somebody might sneer and say, I mean, I was addicted to pentazocine. Any medical person here would understand. It was a painkiller. Something that I was administered to me after I had my third child. And it's a long story. It's not a story for today. So anybody can be prone to addiction, because that's the physiological part of addiction, where, you know, your body system, your pathology and all of that is prone to addiction. But I'm saying here, things that we can deal with. So what are the signs? Behavioral indicators. Number one, what are the things you need to look out for? Shifts in mood and personality. If the child you see is not the child you knew, a child who used to laugh and everything, suddenly clamps up or is acting shadily or something. When there's a mood shift, when a child who usually used to be all bubbly becomes sullen and withdrawn or seeming depressed, the child is no longer motivated. Your child as a teen, you know, yes, we know there's teenage angst, but when a child is unnecessarily silent, for a child who used to be bubbly, for a child who used to come around you, you know, some children are like helicopters. They constantly hover around you. And all of a sudden, this child, you know, doesn't seem motivated. This child is uncommunicative. This child is hostile. You know, the manifestations are so vast. Maybe a child who used to be so quiet, all of a sudden becomes hostile. A child who used to be, you know, very bubbly becomes very, very uncommunicative. It behoves on you as the mother to be able to identify and acknowledge that, no, there's something wrong here with my child. A child who used to be so trustworthy, all of a sudden becomes very secretive, very deceitful. The child cannot focus. A child before who used to be so careful about his appearance and all that, all of a sudden he loses all inhibition. You know why we like to list out these things properly is so, you know, you actually, like I said, we're not aiming that you become paranoid, but you're able to micromanage. You see a child, his friend, his friend cycle changes. You know, like some mothers, they take pride in saying, no, my child doesn't have friends. I tell you, when a child becomes a teenager, it behoves of being antisocial when the child says it doesn't have friends. Do you know your children's friends? You should know them to the extent that when you start seeing strange faces that are not the usual circle your child moves in, it's a flashpoint. Change relationships with family members. Every time his or her room doors are locked. I always like to ask parents this. Some people think, oh, it's not important. When a child begins to avoid eye contact, it's a flashpoint. Like I said earlier, it doesn't necessarily mean the child is using, but behavioral changes are a symptom of something. In most cases, they've been, traced to mental health and all of that, which of course can be treated with certain, maybe therapy and ultimately medication. But like I said, for intents and purposes of this workshop, everything, there's this presupposition that it has to do with drug use, experimentation, or like I said, the levels that will lead totally to addiction and, God forbid, dependence. So you have a child who just disappears for long period of times, cannot give account of money, goes out often, acts irresponsibly, making secretive calls, isolating themselves from others. The list is long. In a booklet I have, on drug-proofing your home, you'll see the list is about, I think about 50. So I don't know if I should go on with the list, but I'll just quickly skip to another major indicator. Under these indicators, we have, sorry, YouTube. Sorry, I'll come back to that if you're listening. I'm trying to just be through with this. Maybe you had a child whose energy levels are very high. then all of a sudden your child is always sleepy, listless. Then actually in this day and age that boys like to play all these electronic games to pretty late. If you're able to kind of maybe isolate that and say, okay, maybe because they stayed up late playing PS4 or something and all of that. But for no reason, the child is always sleeping for long hours, all kinds of things. Please, mother, father, you need to be alert. A child who never used to chew gum, all of a sudden is chewing gum. All of a sudden is chewing gum. All of a sudden the child feels, I need to use Vicin to clear my eyes. My eyes, you see a child whose eyes are usually clear. The child now has bloodshot eyes. A child who used to be so prim and proper, all of a sudden, hygiene, zero. You start seeing burn marks on your child's hand. Every time you're seeing, what do you call it? Lighter. For these days, you see plastic bottles. These bottles that they use for all this spring water now, like the Eva and the rest of them. Every time, it's not as if you have a water factory. Your child is with Swan water bottles or Eva bottle or Cascade bottle or whatever. They're usually signs because there are some drugs that these youngsters use that they dispense from those bottles. So you see, the list is endless. The list is endless. Your child who never used to have nosebleeds suddenly begins to have nosebleeds. Your child who used to speak, quite eloquently begins to slur. All this and more are indicators that something is going on. And there's an interesting part of this thing I want to discuss with us. Okay, fine. You see all of this happening and you're not too sure. There's this saying, it's so funny. They say, when birds have learned to fly without perching, hunters have learned to shoot without, they say, is it hunters that have learned to shoot without missing or something like that? It's one of these things for a party shame saying. So one thing I always like to tell parents and even educators, I say, look, if just seeing all of that, those things, you're not sure, go a step further. Because like we say, like I said earlier, we want to stop these children from, if God forbid they started, at the point of experimentation, it needs to be nipped in the bud. Number one, for those of you who have been in most of these things I have done on drug education as far back as a couple of years in Port Harcourt, I remember telling people how when my eldest son finished SS3, and every time he was always sleeping, and I would just, like that, I'll just tell him, come. I'll stand outside and call him. And when he comes outside, he's like, Mommy, yes. I'll just say what, and I'll begin to look into his eyes. I tell people it's as stupid as it sounds. One thing you should learn to do is not, we say you're looking into his eyes and it's avoiding. No. Learn to look into the eyes of that child that is always listless, and look into the child's eyes in light. Bring the child out to sudden daylight. One of the first things you would see, if a child who is stoned or anything, or his or her consciousness has been warped because of any drug that impairs judgment, because that's basically what drugs of abuse do. Normally, when light shines, if it was some other kind of training, I'll have images and all of that, maybe for any physical workshop, but I don't have this thing to do any of that here. When light is shown into a normal person's eyes, the pupils will naturally shrink because of the light that goes into the eye. It shrinks. But someone who is under the influence, no matter how the glare of light is in that person's face, the pupils are still dilated. That's because the nerve endings and all of that are just totally gone. So I remember I used to do a lot of that to myself, come outside. Then before you knew, they knew I was always calling them for checks. It was crazy then. But you know, that's the easiest way to know if a child is using marijuana or any of these things, whatever, because after some time, they find it difficult to focus. So as a mother, you go and do that. Like I said, it's better to err on the side of being cautious. It's not paranoia. Number two, watch your child's behavior closely. When they go out with friends, when they come back, how do they behave? You know, when they come back, are they shifty? Are they loud? Are they obnoxious? How do they behave? Maybe you have that parent who gives your child the liberty, your teenager, the liberty of driving. Is the child always hitting the car? If the car has scratches, the child comes back every time, has an excuse. It's a red flag. One other thing I tell parents, search their spaces. See, if you give up the right to search your child's space, if you give up the right to search your child's space, I don't think they are co-executors on the property you live in. You know, most people would think this is extreme, but I'm telling you, even when you go for prevention programs in the best spaces in the world, let us say, okay, she's saying this thing locally, they would tell you the same thing. This is a UNC proven technique for curbing experimentation, for stopping your children from getting to the point of no return. Search their spaces. You'll be surprised the things you see. Check their rooms. God forbid, when a child starts using the places they hide things are unbelievable. In chewing gum wraps, in all kinds of things. When you hear parents, you know, when we have interventions and parents tell you how they discovered these things. And so parents will say they would never have imagined that their child would do this. But what do you expect? They're still children. The thing is, we arrogate a lot of responsibilities to these children when they are not ready for such. What you probably have to know and understand is the wisdom with which you will conduct these searches, because if, God forbid, the child is already using, and probably the child is using substance, the child's substance of abuse is one that makes the child, you know, hyperactive and everything. You run a risk of, you know, being assaulted or injured. But in the best way you can, search their rooms. Does your child have unexplained skin abrasions? You must know why. You must know why. Some children who begin to use loud, some of them are home, children who never used to have seizures, they begin to experience seizures. These are indicators. A child begins to vomit, you know, for no reason. You need to know what that child is doing. You need to know the cause. I know some children are so good at just, you know, passing it off. There was this case of a child who suddenly started having nightmares, and the parents started praying, you know, binding and casting. The child would always wake up in the night screaming and everything. They thought it was a demon or whatever. They didn't know this child had already started on crack. So, you know, most of this kind of there are certain drugs that, you know, cause paranoid, you know, episodes, similar to schizo episodes. And the boy used to have his episodes at night. Thankfully, an auntie came to the house, and when they searched, the amount of drug paraphernalia they found in that house was unbelievable. So please search. Your child has glazed eyes, bloodshot eyes. There must be a reason and an explanation. A child who used to be so studious all of a sudden cannot focus on a task. These are the red flags you must look out for. So, you know, we need to know. And mothers, we beg mothers, use your nose, use your nose. You must identify certain smells. I mean, most people who are close to me know that me, I'm almost like a rabid person, probably because of I know what's the pain, you know, and the destruction that this thing can cause to the very fabric of a family. So I tell mothers, use your nose, use your nose. They hide them in all kinds of places, and this is because experimentation has started. Some parents will say, when I carried up his bed, I almost fainted. Loose floorboards, we see these things in movies. Why do we think this are not able to practice it? A child always taking sweet. What kind of sweet is the child licking? And your child tells you, I'm licking Tom Tom. Who tells you? LSD is in sweet form now. Like, you know, most of us parents were so uninformed that we think till it's the obvious kind of drug. These kids, oh, my child is always at home. He can't do drugs. They do it right inside. These days, Uber, all this guys, messenger service and everything, they deliver drugs to homes. A child says, oh, my friend in school is sending me book report and all of that. And when it comes, the package comes into your house, you receive it, you don't check. These children, they're still teenagers. They're still under our roof, your roof. We need to take responsibility, you know, and I don't want to dwell so much on this because, like I said, it's quite a lot. This is a message that I think I have been actively, you know, sharing in as long as I can remember. Like I said, it's 15 years post. So it's something I have been going on and on and on and on and on and sharing. So if you have any questions on that, and maybe you're not too sure of whatever is going on in your space, just do well to reach out to me on that and I'll continue, because I actually want to finish, you know, that list I put. I want to see how far we can go. Then that brings us to another important aspect. I was almost saying interesting, but there's nothing interesting about this kind of thing happening to children. I was telling us about, I was going to talk about the current trends, drug trends. You know, most people think, it's just marijuana. I must inform you that the marijuana of today is not the marijuana, not even the marijuana of that time, all those Afro people used to use. No. Until you see somebody who supposedly took marijuana and sadly did not know it was laced with all kinds of drugs. So whatever it is that was being taken like 20 years ago, now there are variants, and sadly, so many children encounter this. There's something I want to discuss first before I talk about the kinds of drugs that people get, you know, involved with. There's this thing I need to see. Let me see. I put my notes somewhere because for me, that's one of the most important things, even before we talk about drug proofing your home, you know, and I think I listed it out there. I'll just go right now. Like I said, I wanted to just, because if I start speaking of if I begin to speak off script, I'll keep on speaking. Okay, quick one. Let me just this thing, and I'm going to try as much as possible to put myself in check. Okay, I said I was going to talk to us about what puts children, teenagers, youths at risk for drug addiction. And the truth be told, you see, family history, the age that a child first uses drugs, craving, tolerance. Let me take it as it comes. Number one, family history, and it's very important. See, when someone in a child's life, whether the father or the mother or somebody is doing drugs, I tell you, the very likelihood of that child to do drugs is there. It's very high. Oh, my father smokes, my mother drinks, my this, that. These are the things that predispose a child. So the family history, like growing up, we see a lot of children, their parents do all sorts in front of them. They drink, they smoke, and all of that. And you now think your child will just easily not do these things. If there's a family history of substance abuse, whether it's alcohol, tobacco, nicotine, anything, marijuana, already that child from that family is predisposed. And the thing happens because as long as there's constant interaction, the child's risk is heightened. Even if it's a child that maybe the parents now stopped, they're not doing these things again. If it's not dealt with, if you're not able to tell the child that you see those things I used to do, they're not good, these are the repercussions, these are the consequences, and that child goes outside and he begins to see this pattern of behavior that he once saw in his house, although it's not in existence anymore, the child is very, very likely to begin to do such things. So, in which case, who is to blame? The parents who have stopped smoking, who have stopped doing drugs, who have stopped, sniffing cocaine, or the child who once saw these things, but was never taken through properly being informed. You know how when things happen, they will say debriefing. If you watch all these spy films, when the person goes on a mission, when he comes back, the person has to be debriefed. Parents just think children should just learn by the fact that I don't smoke anymore, I don't do this anymore, and not do it. They forget that childhood trauma is an important risk factor. Whatever we think we do as parents, there is always the element of trauma for our children. And most times, these children, because they have experienced that trauma of seeing their father smoke, drink, do this, do that, and of course, maybe probably beat up the mother or whatever. And now because mommy and daddy are now born again, they are in the Lord, they are going to church 10 times and all of that, they most times think these things automatically. The child has dealt with them. Most times, this trauma, they exacerbate as the child grows older. And God forbid there is something, the child finds his or herself in a situation of risk that triggers a certain behavior. It now resolves to patterns. So that's why it's very, very important. Even if, like I always tell people, my children, yes, my older children, they witness my addiction. But post it, I'm telling you, my house, we constantly talk about it. Even my last child who was born after, that's why I call him Bonus. For those of you who never understood why I call him Bonus. He knows, I constantly talk to my children about drug use. We discuss it. Yes, my older son has done marijuana and everything. But, because these things are things we discuss openly. I wasn't afraid to say to him, look, guy, then when I found out, this is what you're doing, this is what you're doing. I'm not, I don't shy away for taking my children for drug tests. They know. They know. So the family plays an important part. You used to smoke before, you now have children and you pretend as if, oh, you never smoked. No, they need to know, and they need to know why you stopped, why you think it's not important for them to do it, why you think it's important they not do it. And that is why I'm saying one of the things that affects children, that puts them at risk, is your parenting style. Ostrich parents, pretending, just like where parents say, I never used to fail in school, I was the best student. Then one day your child finds out from your sister that you used to come last. So if there is family history, do not shy from discussing it. Let the children understand let them understand that things have to be different. That these are the mistakes you made, so they wouldn't make them. So another risk factor, like I was saying earlier, I said, let me not run ahead of myself. Age. Age. It's so sad that sometimes now on social media, you see little children, their parents are giving them sips of beer. You know, it's not doing anything. They're not inebriated. But one thing we don't understand is they are altering the chemical makeup of that child. Before you know it, the child's brain is being rewired. Before you know it, the child starts having cravings that they don't understand. It's much the same way as sex abuse. When children are abused sexually as children, they may start not understanding it, but because the human being is wired and programmed, body is wired and programmed in a certain way, before you know it, the pleasure principles kicks in and the child starts enjoying it. Yes, it's an evil thing, but that is the interaction of the body. That is what is happening. And that's what happens with these drugs and things we expose our children to. And talking about age, I remember there was this I went for a couple of years ago. It was in the Catholic Center here in Lagos. And I was explaining to some parents. It was more like an icebreaker. When I walked into that place, I noticed most children, and I see it in salons. The child is crying. And immediately the mother just gives the child phone. The child is quiet. I remember the time my husband and I were traveling, this child was screaming in the phone on the plane. The mother would give her a tablet. She would just stop. The next thing, in fact, when the battery of that tablet died, nobody slept in that plane again. And you know, one of the things I always tell parents, you're enabling this child because it's instant gratification. And that's the major risk for a future of addiction. They call it the principle of sweetie body. There are some children, they're just how they are. And you know, we parents, because we want peace, we enable them. We enable them. We let them get their way. See, most of these things that happen, they are gateways. They are gateways. If a child loves instant gratification, when he or she becomes a teenager and begins to experience teenage things, peer pressure, you know, begins to experience where somebody has to say no to him or her, they can't handle it. And once they have access to these things that will make them feel better, if you backtrack to the beginning, when I say when people take drugs to cope, to get better, to do this, you see? So now, how are you wiring your child's brain? Even for children as young as 2 or 3 or 4, you can see a child who is predisposed to addiction. Why do I say this? I remember 10 years ago when I gave a test to some parents, I said, see, I'm not one of those parents who will give my child a particular biscuit and not want to change it. If you see, it used to happen very well. In fact, a lot of times. And if you are a parent with a child of between 2 to 4, try it. Give them, maybe they take a particular biscuit to school every day of the week. Then one day you decide to change the biscuits and you put another biscuit. One child may come home and has eaten the biscuit. Another child will come and will bring back that biscuit. And I hear parents say things like, no, she only likes lagbaja biscuits. She only likes lagbaja biscuits. The child cries, that's the biscuit they give her to keep quiet. The child this, that's the biscuit they give her to keep quiet. There are either two things. Number one, yes, the child loves the biscuits, attached to the biscuits. But sometimes take a closer look. Anything that has OL has alcohol. And most times, these beverage companies, these confectionery companies, how they get a hold of these children is they infuse this thing into, it's called sorbitol. Let me just give it to us here. It's called sorbitol. Next time when you go to shops, all these biscuits that are hype that children like it most of the time, they have sorbitol. So what happens is, it's not the biscuit the child likes. What the child is beginning to get a growing dependence on that substance in it and that sorbitol. So if you begin to withdraw that thing and that child, the child wants it, it's a red flag. It's not today we'll deal with that. There are other times, there are other discussion forums, but I'm just letting us know the risk factors. So as children, what kind of thing? I remember back then, not until I was in therapy in 2007 that I understood that there were some things that predisposed me as a child, but then my parents didn't understand. I used to complain, please can you mute? I used to complain every time that I had a headache. And there's this particular drug in our medicine cabinet. I don't know if anybody would ever remember it. It's called Anacin. I don't think there's Anacin in the market anymore. Then, once anybody had a headache, the person was given an Anacin. I remember then the Anacin used to make me feel a little bit drowsy. I'm telling you, I was really, really young. So almost every day I used to say I had a headache as a child. I was one of those kids who, I mean, if I say I want this and they don't give it to me, I would practically lose it. And my father used to like to, they didn't know then that all these things enabling. So these are the risk factors. These are just some of the risk factors. And I'm still going to say more. Cravings and tolerance. I talked about it. When your child is small, what are those things? You know, some parents have zero tolerance for rubbish. Some parents don't have it. You see, when you go to the salon, those women that give their children to keep quiet, I worry about such things. I said it boldly in the meet I was at a couple of years ago here in Lagos. I said, see this thing you're doing, this child's brain is developing, and this child's brain is developing to seek and embrace instant gratification. And the need and the craving for instant gratification is a gateway to addiction. It's a gateway to addiction. And one other risk factor, surroundings. You know, one thing I always like to tell parents, say, the first big transition for any child of yours is when they leave the security of your house and enter school. That's why I said, you can be all prayed up, you can do all of that, but if you do not understand how to drug-proof your home, there will be a problem. I remember when my eldest son was in this prep something to enter uni. I remember when something happened and he said to his friends, if my mom finds out, she will kill me. You know, my mom has been to rehab before. He said it, my son, imagine, he's here. He just came in to tell me something. And I'm like, he doesn't mind my talking about it. You know, he said it, my mom has been to rehab before. If she finds out, she will kill me. See, or not kill me, says she will be disappointed. So you see, whether it's from primary school, the first big transition for your children is when they go out into school. And when they start from elementary school, please can you mute? Remember, we are bouncing off to Facebook and YouTube, and it's to discuss, to disturb the transmission. Thank you. You know, so the thing is, when they advance in primary school, they go to secondary school and everything, they will experience new situations. And most times when they experience new situations, sorry for those of you that have seen, I have to mute everybody on this call. Please, can you all mute yourself? I'm hearing voices coming in and in and in and in and in into this thing. Okay, I'm muting the person now. I don't know who it is, but I've muted. Okay, good. So we continue. So like I was saying, yes. So when they go out like that, so many new experiences, peer pressure, this, so that, whether we like it or not, I said it when we started. Your children are not in a cocoon. They will encounter drugs. I'm sure if some of you talk with your children a lot, they would tell you, even their friends they know that are using drugs. And it's true. They will tell you. Children are at risk, very high risk. Their surroundings, the things they see, the circles of influence. And now, sad to say, for those of you who watched that video at the beginning, there's hardly any song, even in Nigeria, they're singing about dope, Canadian loud, everything. It's become, you know, an urban culture. Your children have seen this. Even a 6-year-old child will ask the mother, what does this thing mean? All these things that are happening, you can't stop them from happening. But what you can do is to take advantage of what is happening as a, you know, they call them discussion bullets, to start a discussion with your children. Some of us were so into this, and no, says who? Haven't you seen a little child, a song starts playing on the radio and the child starts singing it at you, and you wonder, but we don't play this song in the house. So what happened? So the thing is, if we continue with ostrich parenting, it's them, not us. Oh, we are covered. When they leave the house, if you say you are covered, but you have not armed them with the prerequisite information, somebody will show them red and say it's white, and they will accept it. Why? Because you have not taken them to the spectrum of colors. So they don't know. Because you say, talking about, when they go out, somebody will show them purple and say it's blue. They will accept it because they don't know any difference. But the thing is this, one of the positive behaviors that we need to, you know, begin to adopt as parents is, yes, our children will go outside, they will see these things, but how have we informed them? How have we prepared them? And that's where, when we come to how to drug-proof your home, I'm trying to run through it because I don't want to keep us, you know, for more than another next 40 minutes. On video, in the cinemas, online, in music, you know, people who you think should be worthy role models. Now, you know, when you say marijuana, they will hide. Now these superstars are rapping it on TV, rapping it in the midst of corporate giants that are endorsing them. Now there are misconceptions about drugs. It's in Nigeria, it's worse now. Nigeria, in fact, you know, the piano has its searchlight on Nigeria, because now call any top music star who is being endorsed by big corporate entities, they use drugs openly. They use drugs openly. They're smoking openly in events. Nobody's saying anything, you know. And the funny thing is, now, when riffraffs, so-called riffraffs, are doing drugs, they arrest them. So what kind of surrounding do our children find themselves? So it's left for you as a parent to deal with these misperceptions, because I don't call them misconceptions anymore. They are misperceptions, because this isn't how it should be perceived. So this is the risk, major risks our children are faced with. Our children are faced with. Happening things now, if they don't snort cocaine, if they don't heroin, if they don't do that. The rave of the moment now, as far as I'm concerned, they are drug addicts that need to be in rehab homes. And these are the things our children see. We say it begs the question that there is a big risk. These children are at risk. And what are you, the parents? What are you doing about it? What are you doing about it? And that brings me to current trends. I said earlier on, look, that the marijuana of today is not the marijuana of yesterday. And that's the truth. If you on social media, you see when they take all this Canadian loud, what happens to them? They start backing, and you know, the funny thing is it's still glamorized. So that leads us to current trends, current drug trends that things are at risk of. You know, when I started, I told us, I spoke about the routes of administration. I said we have inhaling, we have injecting, we have mucous membrane absorption, we have oral ingestion, and we have contact absorption. So when you talk about drugs that are inhaled, listen, marijuana, free base cocaine, Glue, yes, glue. Like I told some parents a couple of months ago, I said, see, you know this thing they tell our children to bring in school for, let's have one here because I do a lot of crafts. It's like a glue, it's white, top bond. Yes, I remember top bond and all that. It's one of the greatest trends that children as young as 6 and 7 are addicted to. Back in the day, one of the toughest glues around was Evo Stick. And even then, people didn't know it was addictive. It's just that when you inhale it, there's this thing it gives you and all of that. What do you think that was addictive? But you see now, because of the explosion of crafts, there are all kinds of glues in the market. And this thing, children are steadily hooked on this thing. If you have a child, every time the child is asking you for glue, you bought glue 2 days ago, then my friend got missed it. Oh, my dear, check. Oh, I wonder what that child is doing. I know the sad thing is most of these trends that children are, just involving themselves in and all of that, it's not something that can be easily discovered, except, like I said, you choose to be a helicopter parent and begin to notice this thing. How often does your child go through glues? That's talking about inhalants. We're talking about aerosols. We just think only inhalants are cigarettes. Of course, there's vape now. So your child can be doing marijuana and you don't even smell anything in the house because the child is using a vape and it's oil that is put in it. So one thing I always like to know that I say that smoke is because it has been burnt with fire. But there are so many things now that these children are doing. You see, your child can be holding a vapor. You might not even know what it is. You would think it's one gadget like this. So that is why every parent needs to be schooled on what is truly going on. Every parent needs to be schooled, So like I said, even aerosols, even little kids, nail polish, you see them. You see, sometimes when you paint a little girl's hand, every time she's like, oh, she likes the smell. She likes the smell. That's an inhalant she's abusing. It's doing her more harm than good. Then we go to the next one because I said first, inhaling, injecting. Injected drugs now. It's not just heroin, it's not just cocaine. They're having chemical variants. They're having psychedelic drugs. Now, teenagers go to teen parties before. They go to prom, they're dishing out. That's why people keep on insisting. There must be chaperones in so many gatherings that teenagers do. Even when they are chaperones, how well invested are these chaperones in looking out for these children? It's happening. Children are injecting all sorts. And now, I remember we recently did an intervention just after the COVID, sometime last year, for a child that, if it was then, when we used to just inject, my abuse was injectiles. That's why you see I have scars and all of that. This child just had, I don't know what they call it, it's like a cannula. This child had a cannula inserted. How this young teen, because it was about 19, and anytime he wanted to use, he would just remove the cannula. Oh my goodness. In fact, you know how when you go for an intervention as a sponsor, you won't have to show your, hey, as in, oh, now one. But I was shocked. And that kind of thing, like I was like, God, these children are way ahead of us. My goodness gracious. My goodness gracious. So now, they're becoming very sly. Like I said, when hunters have learned to shoot without missing, the birds have learned to this thing without touching. So what happened? The mother just one day saw, this cannula-ish thing. I'm like, what? Do you know, till they found out that this child wears a cannula almost 24/7. And the thing is this, who inserted it before they found out that it was somebody. So you see, surroundings, somebody, how could you have done that to somebody's child and not care to inform the parents that this is what is happening? No, because the price was paid. Then we move on from the injected ones. These ones, they call them drugs. Oh God, have mercy. Drugs of mucosal absorption. And that is the mucous membrane. Parents think it's the child smokes, the child injects. Now there are drugs that they just locate, this soft part inside the nose. Once they just put it and they touch there, the child gets the high. Teens are getting high on nitroglycerin. It's like a capsule. They just break it and they just put it on, your mucous membrane. They just put it there. Nitroglycerin. Even morphine, they call them morphions. They will just put it and all these things. They are controlled substances that can be found on medical shelves. Drugs of mucosal absorption. Were you hearing any of those kind of things when you were growing up? And we think it's still business as usual. It's not business as usual. Then we go on to the next one. We're talking about current trends of drugs. Drugs of oral admission. That's where we have mostly, prescription drugs that are being abused. Xanax, Valium, Lexotan, whatever it is, alcohol. These children, they're abusing them. And the funny thing now, they don't just take strong, straight alcohol anymore. They now have, psychedelic mixes. They mix codeine. Yes, you see some of our stars holding their picture. It's now become a guy thing. And they're mixing. It now becomes fashionable. They're mixing codeine. There's a cocktail of drugs out there. Children are going to parties these days. In our days, when they talk about punch, last night they'll put small gin, small marijuana. But now they're mixing all kinds of things. And our children are out there at risk. Then there's what they call the last current trend is, I don't know how to explain it. It's called transdermal absorption, to show you what these children do. Sometimes you think your child has to smoke. No, they now have, then when you have a nicotine patch, is when you want to withdraw from smoking, they now give you nicotine patch. So it will be releasing small dose. Now, children are abusing those patches. They put the patches on, different parts of their body that has pulse points for them to absorb the nicotine at high concentration. They now have patches for all kinds of drugs. They have LSD drugs, LSD patches. Now, cocaine, you don't have to snort cocaine. Cocaine can be used through transdermal absorption. They put them in. Let me just, for a parent to see that stuff, buy a bag that is put inside that you see in a bag that is like a small envelope, that there's a gel that absorbs moisture. Now, drugs come like that, the kind of drugs they use for transdermal absorption, that these children, it comes with a sticky part, and they just, even cocaine, they just put it on pulse points, and the child is high. That is what is happening right before us. That is what is happening right before us. There are current drugs now that are like eye drops. They're like eye drops. They come in form of eye drops. They come in form of patches. And parents still want to act as ostriches. I'm asking us, let's look. Let's take a closer look at what these children is doing. These children are doing rather. And I pray God will help us. God will help us. It's all good and fine. I mean, we trust God and all of that. But we need to get to a point that we understand that we cannot continue as ostrich parents. We must be, by all intents and purposes, helicopter parents. So finally, I've come to what I'm sure most of us have been waiting for, and that's how to drug-proof your home. This is the part I love. I can actually do a whole session on drug-proofing your home. That is very, very important, but I'm going to try as much as possible to condense it right now. Please, have you been hearing me? I just realized that my microphone is not this thing. If you've been hearing me, can I just see your hands? Can you just By show of hand. Oh my goodness. By show of hand, please, if you've heard anything I've said thus far. Can you just let me know? Oh, thank God, oh, thank God. Let me see. Oh my goodness. Okay. Actually, this thing was not connected. So how to drug proof your home? Please, if you've not been taking down anything before now, try to just take down something, because this part is very, very important. And when we talk about drug proofing your home, how to reduce to the barest minimum the chance of any child of yours just even so much as experimenting. Because like, whether we like it or not, it is widespread in our culture. Everybody that our children are supposed to look up to, they are doing it. But you know what? You can make your space safe such that even when the children go out to this surrounding that they go to, because you're constantly, you know, most parents, we want to act as if these things don't really happen. They exist. But we need to try as much as possible to let our children know that, yes, we know you are constantly facing this every time, but see, hey guy, hey girl, you can do it. You can actually withstand this thing. Let's help them, you know, go through. It's a necessary rites of passage that they would encounter certain things. But let us help them, you know, go through this journey and come out, you know, not scarred whatsoever, because it's possible to have children who are not into drugs at all. Not because they don't want to be, but because they know the fact, they understand what it is. They understand that it is death in itself. And it starts with how you drug proof your home. So the first thing to do in drug proofing your home is what you've come to do today. And that's just to get information. And this is not just the last of it. Continue to seek information. Continue to seek information. Continue to share. There's so many parents who are clueless. You know, most parents think once you give your child everything the child needs or desires, oh, that's good, the child is okay. Forgetting that percentile of the child encountering that enemy that is too strong for them, and there's no other enemy too strong as drugs itself. So the first thing you've done is to choose to be informed. The second thing we should do as parents is to model good behavior. You see, one thing we should know, especially in drug education, we tell people, children learn what they live. When we look at all these people who brashly and openly do all these things they do, you know, drug culture has become urban culture and everything and all of that. And they do it in the presence of their kids. It's all over the news and all of that. Will they expect anything different from their children? That's the question. As they will say, what is the moral standing? The standing, which leg where you go stand on to see me the people? But once we're not like them, some of us in our little corners, we have things we need to deal with. We have behaviors we need to let go of. Because you see something, I always tell people, what you will allow in moderation, when it comes to your children, they will do it in excess. And that's the truth. Although it's not an absolute, I mean, don't take it's not an absolute truth, but it is something, you know, it's how they say, there's this thing, they say, suka, a boy here, that's shift, before you know it, you take over the seat. So that's the thing about this kind of situation. And like I said earlier, you know, even if you have done it, disclosure to your children. So now when you see your child smoking, I say, don't smoke, don't so stop, people, and your child goes outside and says, who? Your papa is not past everybody. So that's it. If you're going to model good behavior to our children, we must tell them the truth. I mean, Uchenna wasn't there when I was going through the throes of addiction. He wasn't born. He's going to be 14 now, yet he knows the details. We talk about it as a family. I know why I keep on saying to them, like this last Mother's Day, you know, when I wrote, I sent a message, a very close friend of mine, she read it because she saw it, I sent it to her. I sent a message to my children via our family page. And I was saying to them, one of the best gifts I can give to you all is the fact that, you know, I didn't cause you the pain of being marked as children whose mother died an addict. I know my children, they like, you know, anywhere I have an opportunity to talk about addiction, my children are excited. If perhaps my daughter goes for a program and they talked about addiction or something, she calls me later and we talk about it and everything. And she said, Mommy, this lady was reminding me, of you. I mean, the things she's gone through. I was just looking at her. They were calling her a survivor. They were calling her, a this. And I was just thinking of you. So please, let's model good behavior. Don't think you are doing these things, you are hiding it, then you expect your child. No. What role do those things do? What role do you think to play in your child's life? So for each parent, you know how you should model the behavior to your children. You know, there's some things I would have liked to talk about, but it's not for today. Another thing you need to do if you want to drug-proof your home, it's called BDRA, build drug-resistant attitudes. You know, for people who are into drug prevention, like me, you know, I have the drug education and enlightenment program. Is something, you know, when I came out of rehab in 2007, I promised myself or whatever, but it didn't take off till 2013, you know. So one of the things you do when you say in drug proofing your home, BDRA, and that's building drug resistant attitudes, you must decide, you know, that you will create an environment that consistently in your home balances love and limits. I'm telling you, what are the boundaries that you put in place for your children? Because the thing is, if you don't build drug-resistant attitudes, you will allow certain things. And when you allow certain things, you know how the Bible says, little foxes that break the vine. Certain things will start creeping in through the vine. And how do I say it? Your children must be spared of consequences. It doesn't matter what it is. You must follow through on whatever consequences you put in place concerning your children's behaviors. They must understand what happens when they make good choices. They must understand what happens when they make bad choices. I remember sharing how at 18, my first son, he did marijuana. Jesus Christ. I took him for drug tests. In fact, every time till he became like 22, he used to have unscheduled drug tests. And truly, it was not an easy thing. You know, when I even share with people, they're like, how can you? I say, see. Because it happened, I wasn't going to trust him again. Now he's 26, he makes his choices. I'm not going to bother my head with going to do unscheduled for a 26-year-old. Make your choices. If you choose to do it, whatever, you will bear the consequences. But you see, whilst these children are still in the experimental stage, you can do what you need to do and get it right. You can do what you need to do. Who knows if one hadn't been so dogged about that thing, how only God knows the other kinds of drugs of experimentation the young man would have gone into. I remember back then in Port Harcourt, there was this lab. In fact, they know me to the extent that I now started, in fact, I had a couple of small, medium scale enterprises who used to invite me for drug tests for their staff, especially food handlers. One or two of them, I get to watch this. I'm telling you, they will just call me, see, ma, I don't know, there's how some of my staff are behaving, and I know you conduct drug tests. What can you do? And I tell you, that's how we're getting them left, right, center. It was amazing back then, because there were just lots of things were happening in the company. And when I come there now, I said, look, these people, they're on drugs. She used to be like, I said, don't worry. So from them, we used to do on schedule. And at the end of the day, it helped the bottom line. So you see, once you're able to just build drug-resistant attitudes in your family circle, it will help them a lot. And one of the other things you will do when you're talking about building drug-resistant attitude, you must have, they call it is a family, positive family identity. Your children must know that in this family, we don't do drugs. So even if it's that you and your husband used to do drugs before, but you stopped, they will know that, look, we used to do it. It was counterproductive. It did not help this family. It did not help this family. Build up your faith. Like I was telling somebody yesterday, I say, see this thing of addiction. Hey, you know how the Bible says, how can you can't deal with a strong man till you come in first and find the strong man. At the end of the day, there is a spiritual component. So your children, when you're building a drug-resistant attitude, you must build a watertight, a watershed environment in your home. It might not be easy to start, but start anyhow. Because as you're doing this, you're drug-proofing your home. Another thing you need to do, begin talking early to your children. If you have never spoken to your children about drugs, start. The best time to talk about drugs with your children is now. Let it be a conversation starter. Start now. And what I was saying to people, remember what I said about this program? I said, your children, do you know what your children know about drugs? Start, ask them. My bonus, if you ask him about drugs, the things he will say, I'm like, God. He will like say, yes, mommy, on YouTube, this, that. And this, sometimes he asks me some kind of questions. I'm like, God. I remember when he asked me that, mommy, why do you think, I'm not going to call the person's name, he called one of the superstars. Why is it okay for him to smoke drugs openly? And that's how we started. And I said, the fact that he's doing it does not make it right. So you must begin to talk to your children early. And there's a whole checklist on the kind of way you should broach the subject. Even when you suspect, please, even if you suspect your child, don't go and start, you don't ever accuse a child. You must understand how to talk the talk. Thankfully, I have your emails for those of you that are registered. So hopefully the next fortnight, I'll try as much as possible to send you the checklist of when you begin to talk the talk with your child towards building, a drug-resistant attitude in your home. So start talking early. And after you start talking early, keep talking. You're drug-proofing your home. You're aware of the kind of things children face. Talk to them about peer pressure. I didn't go too much into that today because if you have to talk about peer pressure and its role as a risk factor in drug addiction, it's a whole session on its own. There are nothing you need to do when you're drug-proofing your home. Find trustworthy adults. There's some things, actually, for parents of teenagers, it's not every time you think you can talk to your child. It's not because you're not afraid of your child, but there's this thing about, bringing in somebody who can be more objective. Somebody who can be more objective. I remember with my second son, that's my third child. At a point, there was a very dear lady. I called him his second mother back then in Port Harcourt. My child was like 17, thereabouts. And I at a point, I couldn't just quite get him, And I just needed to be listening. And one thing she said to me, I remember saying to me, she said, you're going to promise me that you're not going to ask me for the details of what I'm going to discuss with him. But you know what? As long as it's not life-threatening, I'm okay. But if it's a life-threatening thing, I would definitely say that, tell you all that it entails. And I said to her, see, I trust you enough. I said to her, I trust you enough to talk to my son. And I know if it's anything that is life-threatening, you'll mention it to me. So that's another way you drug-proof your home. Find a trustworthy adult. Because sometimes when we think we want to get to our children, we get brash, we make noise, we do this. Sometimes you can gather your children, their friends, and have somebody just come to talk to them about drugs. Not because you worry or anything, because sometimes you just take a back seat and let somebody, remember, I qualified it, a trustworthy adult, somebody you trust. And that's one thing too. If God forbid the child has started, when we do intervention, anybody that is in intervention was somebody that you trust. If not, your story will be on the streets. And another thing, another way you can drug-proof your home, see, as much as possible. Remember I said you must have your positive family values, define the pros and cons in your home and all of that. But as much as possible, this drug-proofing is an ongoing thing. Whatever you think it's a problem, that's why this part of drug-proofing, we call it dealing with pre-existing problems. Whatever is a problem, my sister, deal with it. Anything you think is your home that if you don't deal with it and you let it continue, it might likely put your child at risk. Please deal with it. Please, 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 as a mother, if God forbid your child or a father or an uncle and auntie, the child has started experimenting, like I said earlier, don't wallow in guilt. Don't wallow in guilt. If you wallow in guilt, it will only worsen. Take responsibility for whatever your role is or was in what is going on. And when you take responsibility, you begin to deal with that issue. And you see, when your children, when our children see us dealing with issues and taking responsibility, you see at the end of the day, you're actually modeling the right behavior. If you acknowledge that, oh, I played a role, I didn't parent as well as I should, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that, it's not late to make the decision to begin to parent right today. It's not late. It's not late. You know, there's a saying, they'll say, and they know they teach left hand for old age. But I always say, look, that thing is a lie. It's a lie. Remember, there's this philosopher, John Locke, that said, you can teach anything at any stage, so long as it's part of steps. And that's what this workshop is all about today. Then after you've already drug-proof your home, you know, that drug-proofing was on an emotional level and everything. Emotional level, you know, mentally and all of that. Begin to drug-proof physically. Where do you keep your medicine? Where do you keep, your children just know how to just go? Why do you think when people say keep medicine out of the reach of children? It's not only that the child will be poisoned though. It's that God help you, the child starts taking all this ibuprofen, or you keep your tramadol somewhere, the child takes it, and probably that one will probably kill the child outright. The child overdoses or whatever. But you need to drug-proof your house. If you have a liquor cabinet, lock it. So when I see people having open bars in their home, I'm amazed with little children that can one day want to drink Fanta, does not see Fanta, goes to take one hot drink and drink it. Please, drug-proof your home, lock your liquor cabinet. Keep your liquor away from your children to prevent underage drinking. Please, drug-proof your home. I don't know if parents still send their children to buy cigarettes. In those days, our uncles used to send us to go to buy cigarettes. Your bathroom cabinet, mouthwash. I hope you know children can, when, especially children who take all these inhalants, glue and stuff like that, by the time they're looking for something to get them high, they will start looking for cheap alternatives. Mouthwash, perfumes, nail polish, all those things. Don't keep them carelessly. Over-the-counter drugs, don't keep them carelessly. You need to physically drug-proof your home. Where do you put your inhalants? Where do you put your pain? Where do you put your nail polish? Where do you put your liquor? Where do you put not liquor? Where do you put your glue? Where do you put your aerosol cans? Where do you keep them? Where do you keep them? Even for mothers who are bakers, do you know that children are getting high on vanilla extracts? The list is endless. So I beg us, please, that these children will have a fighting chance of an awesome future. There's a reason why the United Nations decided to just set aside the 26th of June every year. The theme for this year, you know, it's about care. How it's care in crisis. And you know, the theme is because they're thinking that with all this crisis going on, with the pandemic having happened, with all this crisis, wars and everything, the practice of drug abuse has escalated. In all this, they call them refugee camps, in all these IDP centers, displaced persons, children are affected. The crime rates are escalating because of the use of drugs, so many things. So this year they said care for crisis. But since, you know, in my advocacy for drugs, I have chosen the path actively since 2013, the path of educating parents, because of what I saw, to educate parents that they know better to do better. So today I hope, with like how people say during the debates, I hope I've been able to convince you. But I'm not out here today to convince you, but just to give you this feeler, to let you understand that there's nothing more important than protecting your children, and not just your biological children, children in your care. Giving them a shot at a better tomorrow. God bless you. So, are there any questions? I'm done. Are there any questions?
Thank you,
Ma. If you have anything to say, you can unmute and talk. Is that okay, Matilda? Yes. Do you have anything to say? Who has something to say? Just signify and bring you on to say something. Do I have any questions from those of you on Facebook or so? So I'll just round up there, but one thing I would just like to advise each and every one of us, I hope is not lost. Okay, Onye wants to say something. I've asked you to unmute. Please, can you go ahead?
Okay. Good evening, ma'am. Thank you so much for this session. Very insightful. I don't know about other people, but when you started talking and you explained the types of drugs, I was like, God help me, God help us all. But I just want to say thank you. If we paid for this session, I can't imagine how much we would have paid. Thank you so much. I also want to remind you, you said you were going to send us a mail, yes, telling us how to
for those of you that registered
and how to ask questions. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
For those of you that registered, in fact, I will not wait 2 weeks. Is so far. For those of you that registered, I'm going to send you by tomorrow. I promise, by tomorrow evening, you will get that mail. Because this time around, one of the mistakes I always make is anytime people don't understand why I ask for registration. And also I always like to insist that, look, it's free. Why I ask for registration is so when I have your emails, you know, I can follow up with the information you might need. And so when you get the email, the email that I sent to you, in case you have any questions, because usually back in the day when I started this thing, you know, I started it back then on BlackBerry, so it was easier. So with time, emails, what I'll do now is I'm going to send you all. It's a checklist. It doesn't matter how difficult you think parenting can be, is for you or can be. You will find a way. There will be a tactic, a way that you will be able to ask a question. Because one thing most people find difficult is asking that first question. And that first question is usually the icebreaker. So for each child, you have your children, you know your children, because you might choose to, actually, it depends on their age range, you know. Some people, when we talk to small children, you can talk to your small children together. But with children who are already older teens and all that, you know, you must have icebreakers. There are icebreakers you will use to start the conversation and all of that. But definitely, I will send you the mail on, it's called How to Have the Talk. How to have the talk. You know how they say, if you don't talk to your children, someone else will talk to them. And guess what is talking to them? The media, whether it's traditional media or social media or new media, their friends, their peers, urban culture, so many things are talking to them. So definitely I would send, for all of you that participated, I will send you the email containing the top. Because incidentally, I had so many people register, but I just have how many of you here attending. And I'm just so grateful that you attended. And I pray you'll be able to take this message that is so important. And God help us. God help us really. Thank you very much, Onyai. Does any other person have anything to say? Kelly's saying something here and it's making me, I'm just laughing. God bless you too. As Kelly's telling me, because he used to be in school with me. You see, he says, Nene, you were never close to smoking, alcohol intake and drugs growing up in Calabar, but much more in debating on topical issues, this, that. And he says, our society today is on the fast track. And that's, you know, and that's why when I started, I said, I'm only going to talk about teens and young people addiction, because when we're talking about addiction in adults, it's a different kind of component altogether. And when we're talking drugs, people think addiction is only marijuana, this, that. And that's why initially I never used to bother to clarify with people. Because when you go into treatment, nobody's going to say, what's your drug of choice? When you're introducing yourself, you say, so I'm so and so, and I am they put it, you say, I'm an alcoholic. That's how they used to put it, and all of that. So it's only when you go into the nitty-gritty of it, you begin to understand that there are different substance of abuse. I was addicted to pentazocine. It's a medically controlled drug used for how do you call it? To control pain and all of that. But the fact remains, it doesn't matter what your drug of choice is. Once you become an addict, once you tip the scale of just habituation to addiction, then now dependency, you become an addict because you cannot live without it. You begin to lose control. In fact, you're ready to jump down from a plane because you want to have it, because at that point it starts controlling your impulse. It starts doing this. That's why people don't understand. Even alabuku, I knew people who were addicted to alabuku. What we don't understand is that most of the things we take, they have certain chemical components that can just change your whole nervous system. The substance of abuse we use, they attack certain parts of your nervous system. And that's why most times they say addiction, some people, even when they get better, like I've been sober for 15 years now, sobriety for 15 years, that's how they call it, sobriety. And I'm thanking God because thankfully for me, the substance of abuse I was using did not give me what they call the double tragedy of addiction. Because the double tragedy of addiction is, yes, you are no longer an addict, but guess what? You now have permanent psychotic issues that you now have to use psychotic drugs to be dealing with. And those kind of drugs, they kind of drugs of abuse that cause such things, all these barbiturates, marijuana, all this loud, all these people are using crack and all of that. So there are different components. So it's not enough to say, oh, when you were young, you were not doing this. Yes, even up till today, if you bring marijuana to me, I will have no business with marijuana. I will not go near marijuana. I will not go near cocaine. I will not do this. But you see, addiction as it's in its own is an illness. It's an illness. Much as people are addicted to sex, you have sex addicts. You have tech addicts. You have people who are totally addicted to social media. I mean, a couple of years ago, it was bad for me that I even had to cry to God, and he started giving me instructions. In fact, 3 months in the year, from January to April, I will not come on social media. I was taking a social media fast. There are people who are addicted to gambling. We're talking about the issue of addiction. It's not about this or that, but we only talk why we're talking about it like this today is because of children, and we're talking about the drugs, you know, and the influence of urban culture and how it is a risk. So we're talking about addiction. You might not be an addict of drugs, but you see, you are a sex addict, you are a gambling addict, you are an addict to gaming. There are so many components. Addiction is a whole gamut. So we take them, you know, in modules, so to speak. But today we're especially just talking to parents. And that brings me to this thing. Parents, it might not just be drug addiction. Your children can be addicted to you say PS4, they can be so addicted that it drives them. Even in their sleep, they are playing PS4. So you see, it's a whole gamut. So it has nothing to do with whether I was shy, I was this, I was that. Another person will take pentazocine and nothing will happen to them. They will just go on. So see, those are the predispositions I'm talking about, and that's chemical predisposition. So for that, I want you to understand that addiction as a phenomenon is not just about drugs. It's anything that you abuse its use, and before you know it, you're totally dependent and it controls your life. That's why they say the first rule of drug addiction in itself, addiction is in itself is a total loss of control. That's why you see an addict is ready to sell her body, her family for cocaine. That's not the act of somebody who is normal, you know. But today we are schooling parents, so before their children get to that point of experimentation, they're able to nip it in the bud. And God forbid they've already started experimenting, you can stop it before it becomes habituation. Then God forbid if they started habituation and all of that, you can stop it before it becomes addiction. And then if it's now addiction, before it becomes dependence, you begin to seek help. Because it gets to a point you can't handle it as parents, you need to seek help. So thank you very much for all of you that have joined me today. Please just continue to spread this message. It will be on my page on Facebook, so you can still watch it if you have any questions. But for those of you who were here on this feed, of the names on this thing, let me just take a picture of those who entered into the room. Because one thing I've noticed, and it's really sad about us, is that when you invite people to something that is free, they never ever take it seriously. So some people bothered to register and just didn't show up. And I keep on wondering, if you had paid, wouldn't you have shown up? So for those of you who came into the room, Oye, Ugochi, Mercy Benefactor, I don't know who this is. Galaxy 832, can you just send me your name? Galaxy 832, send me your name, please. So I'll be able to check for your mail and send you the mail. Galaxy 832, can you send me your mail? Thank you very much, Matilda. Hi, Shay, right? So for those 6 of you here with me, I definitely will send you the mail after this. So expect the mail, expect the handout on how to talk the talk with your children. I hope it's not just with your children, you also teach other women, you know, in your spheres of contact, how to have the conversation with their children. Please don't let it just be your children. Imagine if the 6 of you here, you know, talk to other women about it. And before you know it, it's a snowball effect, because even your children, especially those who are teenagers, not even all just teenagers, the ones who are preteens, young children, imagine when they become peer educators and talking to their friends about it as well. Yes, Matilda, thank you. Matilda says she will teach the children in her church. Honestly, it's a beautiful thing. And your children, before you know it, they become peer educators. Imagine when they're in the midst of people who are doing this, and you see young, well put out youngsters, you know, talking to their friends about these things. Most of the time they listen to peer educators even much more than, you know, we the adults. So thank you very, very much. God bless you all. And like I said, I'll send it. God bless you. Ciao, ciao.